Welcome back. How do we commemorate Jewish suffering that has taken place throughout our history? I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, and in this episode, together with the Wednesday night group, we look at the topic of Jewish suffering that has taken place throughout our history and the time that we are currently living through, the Omer, and we look at the response and what lesson we can take from it for our everyday lives. The days in between Pesach, Passover, and Shavuot, which we are currently in. And what's interesting actually is in the Torah, when it talks about all the different festivals, it gives them a date, right? For example, for Passover, it'll say the Passover is on the 15th of the month of Nisan. For when it says for Shavuot, it actually doesn't give a date for it. All it says is that you should count 7 weeks of 7 days, and at the end of the 7 weeks of the 7 days, that's when the festival of Shavuot is, when we celebrate receiving the Torah. Now, what's very interesting about the Omer is that there's a few interesting things going on. Number one is that there is it's 7 weeks, but there's a mitzvah every single evening, every single night, to count the day of the week. That is the mitzvah of the Omer, which is a fascinating mitzvah, and we're not going to discuss that tonight. Instead, something which I think makes the Omer a little bit more well known is that, as Martine told us a little bit earlier, there are certain customs. So Martine mentioned about beards, and you'll often see religious men during these days who don't ordinarily have a beard, growing a beard. Exhibits my husband, if anyone has seen him around recently, he is a 10-day-old beard or whatever it is. So where that comes from is there is a custom not to cut hair at all during these days. And there's another thing I think Martine also mentioned, that is we don't listen to music and we don't hold weddings. Now, why on earth do we have these customs? Does anyone know any story that happened or anything? Or have I stumped you all? All right. It's kind of like a semi-mourning period. So I'm gonna actually read you out why we have this mourning period, because you'll find something that's actually really, really interesting about it. So the book that says it's called the Aruch HaShulchan, right, which writes about different Jewish laws, and
is it about finding yourself? Like 49 days to sort of think about yourself, like find where you are.
So that is a great question, Maddie. And I'm going to yes, you're right. Okay, so let me clarify a little bit, and then we'll get back to answering the other question. So Maddie asked the question, there are 49 days in the Omer. Now, what's actually interesting is that obviously these 49 days, I was going to actually say a little bit later, but this is better. I'll put it right in here because that was a great question. So the way it is described in the Torah is that on Passover, we bring a barley offering, right? In the times of the temple, on Passover, we would bring the barley offering. And we count, and interestingly enough, the Sefirah Omer is named for that offering. And then we count 49 days until Shavuot, and on Shavuot, we bring the wheat offering. Why am I mentioning this in relation to Maddie's question? Is because barley is animal food, right? It's what you serve, what the farmers serve the animals. Wheat is human food, right? Is, you know, wheat for bread, or etc. The symbolism is very clear here, right? The pathway, we came out of Egypt, and we're working towards the Torah. We're working towards the pathway of receiving the Torah at Shavuot. And the symbolism is very clear. We're trying to leave our animalistic pathways away, and make ourselves into human beings that are ready to receive the Torah. Now, in order to do this, there are 7 cycles of 7 days. And each day has a certain character trait that we are supposed to work on. And so Maddie is 100% right that is the idea behind the counting of the Omer, the depth, I guess, behind the counting of the Omer. And when we count the Omer, when we make the blessing and count the Omer, at the end of it, there is something that we say, where we say each, you know, this is the character trait of today's day. For example, there's one day where one week which is chesed, which is kindness, and then there is another week which is dedicated to gevura, which is discipline. So a day within the week of kindness might be the day dedicated to discipline within kindness. Now, what that means is that on that day, the character trait that we're supposed to develop within ourselves, we're supposed to focus on, is having the discipline to be kind correctly in the right times, because sometimes we can be kind in the wrong places, right? And sometimes our kindness needs to be disciplined, to be more disciplined. So Maddie is 100% correct, and that is actually a fascinating topic. There are WhatsApp groups that are dedicated to, you know, sending out each day what the character trait of that day is. And if anyone wants to message me afterwards, I can send you a link to them, because it is really a very fascinating and worthwhile endeavor. All right, so that answers Maddie's brilliant question of whether these days are dedicated to becoming people that are ready to receive the Torah. Now let's go back and try and answer, why are we mourning why is it a period of semi-mourning? And it's very interesting, I think, that we're having this class on what is also Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day in and I think you'll see that it ties in very well, and can hopefully give us something to take away with us today. So listen to what the Aruch HaShulchan writes, right? So he's writing about what's behind this these days. These days between Pesach and Shavuot have been accepted by all Israel for many centuries as days of tragedy and mourning. For in this brief time period, there died the 12,000 pairs of sages who Rabbi Akiva's disciples, Rabbi Akiva's students. We also see that the main anti-Semitic persecutions in century past in France and Germany were in these days, and there were also other reasons. Therefore, it has been the custom of all Israel since the days of the Gaonim not to marry between Passover and Shavuot. So what it's telling us here is that there's a couple of reasons. Primarily, the days between Pesach and Shavuot are set aside, 33 of them for most people, are set aside as a period of semi-mourning, because Rabbi Akiva, who was one of the great Torah giants, he was one of the things, a couple of things he was famous for was his positivity. He was also famous for teaching about loving other people. He was the famous Rabbi Akiva who was a shepherd, actually a rabbi hater until the age of 40. And at 40, he had a moment of epiphany when he realized he was walking out he was out shepherding his sheep, and he saw a rock with a hole in, and he looked up and he saw that there was a little drop of water above, and he realized what happened was that that little drop of water had over the years persistently drilled a hole into this hard rock. And he had a moment, an aha moment, where he thought, wow, if a little drop of water can make a hole on in a hard rock, then Torah can make an impression on my heart, because Torah is compared to water. It's life-giving in that respect. And he went from the beginning to start to study the alphabet, and he worked all his way up until he became the leading Torah rabbi in his generation. He raised 24,000 students, and all of them died during a plague during these days. So obviously that is extremely, extremely tragic. And what we're told here is that as well as that, as a result of that, the Jewish people took on the custom of having a semi-period of mourning. Now, it's all very understandable to a point at this point, but listen to what it says. It says, also because of the persecution in France and Germany. Right now, what we're talking about is we're talking about the Crusades, the anti-Semitism, right? As Jews, we've unfortunately had a lot of tragedies in our time. So the challenge is that this was probably put into place somewhere between the 7th and 10th century. But the first Crusades began in 1096. So how on earth could the Aruch HaShulchan write that as a result of the persecution that hadn't yet happened, the Jewish people took this upon themselves? Any ideas? What might be going on here?
He's like seeing into the future.
So Lindsay is saying they might be seeing into the future, and you know what? You're actually in a way right, and I'll explain to you what's going on. So we had the temples, right? And the first temple got destroyed, and it was tragic, right? Many more thousands of people died at when each of the temples were destroyed. And as a result of it, the sages decreed that there were going to be 3 weeks where we would have a semi-mourning period, and that takes place in the summer as a commemoration of what happened. Now, fast forward to the second temple being destroyed, and fast forward to now. The 12,000 pairs, the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. Was it the most tragic thing that happened in history? No. I mean, we know that, like, we don't have to go that far back to look at the Holocaust, right? Where unfortunately 6 million Jews were destroyed. But the sages realized that this was not the end. They realized that unfortunately this was happening, right? Tragedies were visiting the Jewish people. So what should their response be? Now, let me ask you the question. If you had to decide what's an appropriate response to Jewish tragedy, what would you say? Any thoughts, any ideas? What do you think is an appropriate Jewish response to tragedy?
To pray and to try and look into why it might be happening and what we can do to prevent it.
All right. Those are 2 very, very powerful ideas: to pray and a period perhaps of introspection. Any thoughts? Yes.
To mourn to a certain extent.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Period of mourning.
To adapt your mind in the sense that, how you said previously, when you have negative thoughts, when something negative happens, to them not instantly see the positive, but see something positive behind that negativity. Almost like not transcending, but you kind of going from one to the next, but you're like being able to switch, like be more diverse. That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a tall order though.
Yeah.
It's a good one, but it is a tall order. And I would also venture to say that that is an appropriate response for our own sufferings, right? And please God, we should all be blessed with easy lives and the daily,
I wish.
exactly. When it comes to other people's sufferings, it's a little bit the response then is a little different, right?
Yeah.
So but we're going to get back to what you said as well, right? So I think what Martine and Nikki and Lindsay said were all very good ideas, very good points. And let's also look at what they did in the past. In the past, they set up a fast day. Tisha B'Av, right, is a day to commemorate the both of the temples being destroyed, and also a day to commemorate when all Jewish tragedies happened. But the sages realized they can't start putting a fast day every time there's a Jewish tragedy, because unfortunately, there wouldn't be enough days in the Jewish calendar to have them. So what did they do is that they voluntarily accepted a period of semi-mourning, right? 7 weeks of 7 days. It's like almost a full cycle. Now what is this semi-mourning? It's a time where we don't listen to music, we don't have haircuts, we don't have weddings. It doesn't sound as dramatic as, for example, the whole country stopping for a moment of silence. But you know what? It's real, and I'll explain to you why. Because when a person when we have this period of mourning within this year, it almost like directs the whole year. Like, for example, if someone gets engaged and they're planning a wedding, they plan it around the Omer, right? Oh, you can't have it before, you've got to either have it before Pesach, or you've got to have it during Lag BaOmer. That's the day in the middle of the Omer when the mourning season finishes, or after Shavuot. Same thing, you know, I've sat on many fundraising meetings, right, where they have a meeting about like a fundraiser, and the whole fundraiser is planned around the whole Omer. So again, it's not a dramatic thing. It's not like saying, you know, everyone has to stay take a moment of silence, but it's something that's real and something that almost permeates our entire year, right? When it comes to having a haircut, we have to have a haircut before Pesach. Well, in the times when in the pre-COVID times, right? This year's a little bit different because hairdressers are only obviously opening on Monday. But again, it's the same. It's these semi-mourning, but something that permeates our entire year, and it's something that's there to remember the 24,000 students of our Akiva that was passed away, but also to remember, you know, the Crusades, the burnings in Poland, the oppression that the Jews have experienced throughout our ages, including the Holocaust. Now, I want to share elaborate a little bit on what Lindsay said, and Lindsay was saying something about transcending that suffering, and I think it's very meaningful, the fact that these put it this way, right? God created the world, God wrote the Torah, God put the calendar into place, right? So there's no coincidence that these days of mourning ends with Shavuot, right? That it takes place during the time period where we're counting up to Shavuot. And what is it perhaps suggesting? And I think it's perhaps suggesting what Lindsay just told us, is that it ends with receiving the Torah and when we became the Jewish people. And what is it hinting? It's hinting that it's not in vain, right? We don't know what God's plan is, but we know that there is a plan, and it's telling us that the suffering leads to something. And for anyone that's joining us on Zoom, I'm going to share a screen. For anyone on Instagram, I'll read it out loud so you can hear it as well. Let me try and do this. Okay, so can everyone see?
Yeah.
Okay, so Orison Swett Marden was an American non-Jewish author. He wrote this in 1894, And he says, it is opposition that develops us in the very power by which we overcome. Without opposition, we could, hold on. Hold on. Let me just give me a moment while I, oops. Sorry, it does not seem to be working. I'll have to just read it. Sorry. So you won't be able to hear it, but I will read it. He says, without opposition, we could never have braced and fortified ourselves as the oak is braced and anchored for its 1,000 battles with the weather. Our trials and sorrows and griefs develop us in a similar way. The man who has triumphed over difficulties bears the sign of victory on his face. An air of triumph is seen in every movement. Almost from the dawn of history, oppression has been the lot of the Hebrews. Yet they have given the world its noblest songs, its wisest proverbs, its sweetest music. With them, persecution seems to bring prosperity. They thrive where others would starve, right? And what this non-Jewish author is recognizing on his own is that as Jews, unfortunately, our history has been replete with many, many tragedies, many oppressions, many persecutions. And we don't, as individuals and as a people, we don't look for suffering, right? We pray every single day in the morning prayers. We ask God not to put us in the way of challenge. But what he recognized, and I think what we all recognize, is that challenges make us, right? And what he recognizes is that the challenges that the Jewish people have suffered over the ages, they lead to something. And that is, they lead to the Torah. And what's interesting is that Rabbi Avigdor Miller, who was a rabbi that lived, sorry, give me a moment, who lived not that long ago, and he writes about that. We're very grateful. We just came out of Pesach, Passover. We're very grateful for Pesach, for coming out of Egypt. And we can see that by how much effort goes into Passover. And he says, why are we so grateful? And he says, the reason why we're so grateful is because so many wonderful things come out of it. Not only did we become free, but we became a people and we got the Torah. And the Torah is what gives us life, what gives us meaning, what gives us happiness in life, and it also gives us eternity. So what the Omer is really pointing at, what it's hinting at by it being coinciding with the days where, as Maddie correctly said, we are working on ourselves to become people that are worthy of receiving the Torah. Every day a different character trait, every day a little bit of a different focus. And we're also recognizing, we're also taking a period of semi-mourning where we're recognizing the terrible tragedies that have happened to our people. And, we don't know God's plan, but we do know that there is a plan, and that those suffering, it leads to something. It leads to us receiving the Torah and us accepting the Torah and accepting that life of happiness and meaning that brings with it. And I just want to end with a story which I think really illustrates this point. And some of you may have heard this story from me before. I'm not sure if Bev is still, no, Bev is not no longer with us, but there was a Rebbetzin in Jerusalem. Her name was Rebbetzin Machlis, and one of the things that she was very, very famous for was that they used to have 200 guests for every single meal, every Shabbat meal. And what's fascinating about the story is that she grew up as a regular woman, a regular girl, a regular woman in Brooklyn, New York. They moved to Israel. And when you read that, there's a biography written about her. And when you read the story, one of the things that comes out is that she lived with a tremendous amount of calmness, serenity, love for people. And the author does a brilliant job of really showing where the roots of this was. And the roots of it was because she was a person who was so connected to God and to Torah, that flowed from her, and that flowed into her love for other people. The way she cared for her children. Unfortunately, she passed away when she was quite young. But she had 13 children, and after she passed away, each one of her children said, I was the one that I was the most special child. Right now, I mean, if you can imagine, like usually our kids fight over you love her more than me, or you hate me more, right? Her kids, each of them thought that they were her special child, and we see where does she have this strength, this calmness, this happiness, this meaningful life, and this ability to live that way? It was because she was she was so connected to God and to the Torah. Ilana, her name was Henny Machlis, and the name of the book, for anyone that wants to read it, is Emunah with Love and Chicken Soup. It's a really, really worthwhile book. It's an amazing book. But thank you all for joining, and may we all take these days and take a little bit of the inspiration from these days to incorporate that happiness and the meaningfulness that comes from living a Torah life. Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts or your feedback. And if you got anything out of this episode, please share, like, or subscribe to get future episodes. Thank you for spending your time with us, and have a wonderful day.